I have been doing stand-up comedy in the Bay Area and plus more for a little over a year now, like a year and some change. I think it's like a year and 2 months or something like that. And I just wanted to make this video with my own personal experience with it and a review overview and my thoughts and what I got out of it. And the purpose of this video is maybe for anybody who has been considering doing stand up or joining an open mic community or whatever, or maybe if you're a comic and I've met you throughout this past year or so, just to hear my thoughts, on what I think of this whole thing that's going on. It's been an experience, man. It has been an experiment. This has been an experiment, actually. It has been an experiment and an experience. So, I wrote a bunch of things. There's pros and cons of this whole experience, and I was mainly in the Bay Area. I know I said plus more, which is like the Sacramento and Stockton areas that don't count as the Bay Area. But I don't know. Maybe if you're from another area, the comedy community could be a little different. So I just want to be specific as to the region I'm in. Because if you're like in New York or Oregon or Arizona or something and you're watching this video, maybe things don't apply here. But this will go into a little bit more detail of particularly the Northern California part of things, which I feel from what I've seen and other research that I've done online, it seems to be one of the booming places for comedy. It seems to be one of the places to be. Probably, I'd say it's in there in the top 5, you know? You have, of course, a place like LA, the big major cities like LA, Southern California comedy scene, maybe New York, and of course the whole Austin, Texas scene ever since Joe Rogan and his band of Avengers moved out there. The scene is kind of sporadic. I've noticed a lot of people from the Bay Area have moved over to Austin to try and give an attempt with their luck over there. And shows like Kill Tony and stuff like that, which I will touch up on later on. But yeah, I guess the first thing that I would start about with just in general starting stand-up comedy is the personal things that I've learned about myself. Number one of the biggest challenges with stand-up comedy is you cannot edit live comedy. Like how you can edit the internet or edit these YouTube videos that you make. So I think that's really good for personal development. I feel like it gives you a good sense of self-awareness. I feel like there's a lot of people, and maybe even myself included before I started doing stand-up, there's a lot of people that think things are funny, but they'll be surprised to the general public or most people or an audience. It's not funny, or maybe it is funny, but just the way you communicated it was not funny. And there's a big difference between telling a joke in front of a big group of people and maybe editing a funny joke for the YouTubes. But I feel like there's probably a lot of people on YouTube that think they're funny or something, and they go ahead and make a YouTube video. Then they'll look back on it years later, and they'll just kind of cringe and be like, what was I thinking? Well, stand-up comedy can be like that, but maybe even worse. So I guess a lot of people always say this, but I think it is a good tip to record your sets, whether it's audio or video. Maybe audio is more important than the video, so that way you can hear the feedback from the audience. Well, obviously, yeah, you wouldn't want to record a muted video, right? So it's also another thing that I've learned in the stand-up comedy. Well, I kind of felt like it was like this when I first started, but to begin with, I always thought that stand-up comedy was a dying art. I had this thought in my head when I first started doing this, and now that it's been some time, I still stand by it. I still think it is a little bit of a dying art, but I still pay my respects to it. I still respect it, and I still appreciate it. And that goes into my next subject here, is that a lot of these stand-up shows and just stand-up comedians in general give off that theater vibe. If You know what I mean? There's a lot of comedians who I've met that have done performance arts or theater or some kind of background in that. And that is just not really my style. And this could just go into a personal like con or something, but even though it is not my style, I still respect the hell out of it. I think performing on a stage or being a stage actor is way harder than being a movie actor. You know, you can't really yell out cut during a play. So it's just unbelievable that these people can memorize lines and things like that. A lot of these comedians that you may not know, they memorize their acts. Like I've seen comedians do the same 5 to 10 minutes multiple times. And I knew that was a deal, but it's just still kind of like eye-opening to just wrap my head around that. Because for the longest time as a kid and growing up, I always thought stand-up comedy was just people who were considered funny going up and just improvising and just riffing is what people like to call it, and just talking about things. I never really knew that it was a calculated, written out, performed thing, and that's kind of what takes away the magic, if you will. And maybe saying that it's a dying art is might be a little cruel, but I think there is some truth to it, at least saying that it is a hurting business, hurting art, especially ever since COVID. People don't like to go out anymore, you know, and all of these times, and I'll go into this a little bit more, every time I drive any more than like an hour to do stand-up comedy, I always kind of think to myself, I could have just made a TikTok. I just feel like, especially these younger kids, nobody's really interested in doing stand-up comedy. I feel like a big percentage of people want to be internet stars, or they want to go viral. They want to do TikToks or something. So I actually had an experience with this one time. I was supposed to do a show or an open mic. This particular night was actually an open mic, and I decided not to because I was lazy to drive out and risk my life in the freeway or traffic or whatever. And instead that day, I decided to make a YouTube video talking about something that happened on the news. Maybe I'll put the link on there or whatever, but just some current event, and just do my take on it and do a little bit of narrating over the scene that happened. And it ended up being like one of my most popular videos. I mean, it got like over 2,000 views, you know, and that's nothing. I don't get paid or anything, but I always think that's probably way more attention than I would have gotten to going to an open mic. You see what I'm saying? So it really just like depends on what you're in there for. So if you're trying to do stand-up comedy, or you're trying to be any kind of content creator or anything creative like that, there's very little recognition that you can get. You know, I always think about that. It's like I stayed home and I got 2,000 views on a quick video that I made instead of wasting 2 hours of my life. So it's all perspective. You know, I don't really want that to come off too discouraging, if you will. Comedians, like famous comedians that I like, I've noticed they all have popular podcasts. And I feel like a lot of people that I've talked to, including myself, we like these comedians' podcasts more than we actually like their stand-up sets and stand-up specials, because you just kind of see through the curtain now, and nobody really wants these rehearsed thoughts. Everybody wants things to be more natural, real, and transparent. And that's why I like it. You know, I always think, and that's kind of why I started doing comedy in the first place. Shameless plug on my own YouTube. I have a podcast called Suicide Logs. Let's talk about how grueling open mics and small shows can be, man. Open mics can be, I think it's a known thing in the comedy community that open mics are the hardest shows that you can do, which is crazy. You know, you think it's easy to do the open mics, and then as you get better, the shows get harder. But I understand it. The open mics are harder because, one, you're probably around a bunch of other comedians. A lot of the times the audience are just other comedians, and if it's other comedians that you've met before, it's highly likely that they've heard your material already if you're kind of working on something or doing the same jokes. And a lot of people just don't want to be at an open mic comedy night. I don't know about you guys, or never me and my friends are like, hey, let's head down to the bar. They've got open mic comedy going on. I feel like to the average civilian, they associate open mic with, oh, these are sucky comedians, especially if it's like a free show or something. There was an open mic night that I used to hit all the time in Oakland, and they would charge people $20. And it was actually one of the most successful comedy nights. There'll be like 20 to 30 comedians on the lineup. So if you show up late or something to sign up, you are waiting forever with a bunch of other people who might be doing stand-up for the first time, or people who are just not that good. And that is challenging for yourself and your set, because you're going to lose the audience, you know? If there's 10 other comedians that suck before you go up, and I'm not saying that you're great or anything, or you don't suck, but it's just going to make it harder. The attention span, like we touched up on earlier, is just too short. And if it gets ruined with 5 other comedians, you kind of lose the crowd. And it can be very discouraging. It definitely can be very discouraging. You drive, do all this traveling to do an open mic. With that being said, though, when you do very well, it becomes addicting. It definitely becomes addicting. I remember when I first did stand-up comedy, I was just like, yeah, we're just going to do one and done. We're just going to try it out, and that's it. And then literally the next week, I was doing another stand-up, or I was doing another open mic. And I got addicted. I could not stop. I kept trying to come up with new material. I kept trying to just say things that were, or just come up with things that were funnier than the last time. And then I had this crazy strategy for the first, 4 to 6 months of doing comedy, where I wanted to do a new 5 minutes every single time I got up there. And that would build my anxiety. That would be really hard, but at the same time, I feel like it was good for me, because I didn't want to get used to doing the same thing from my first night or whatever. And then it really helped me build new material by trying things out and picking, okay, well, which one worked the best? So after like 6 to 7 months of doing new material, like a new, brand new 5 to 4 minutes every single time I went to do comedy, by the end of it, I was like, wow, I have 10 minutes, or maybe if you want to be strict about it, shorter than that, 10 to 8 minutes of like solid material, the best of every single thing. So every time I did a new 5-minute set, you'd probably come up with 30 seconds to 1 minute of good material. Then you just start adding on to it. And so you get really meticulous about how you want to do things. At least I did. I realized like, oh, well, this joke worked really well. Oh, well, I bet it kind of fits in really well with this next joke. So sometimes I'll have a set with a bunch of jokes that I've already done before, but it's in a specific order, so it's new to me, if that makes sense. And the most recent thing that I've worked on is I've got like 5 minutes on a whole bunch of anti-Semitic jokes, just a bunch of Jew jokes that I randomly came up with at different times. And then I was like, wow, if I just did 5 minutes on Jew jokes, that'd be great. And so that's what's recent with me. I've also learned that you can see another comic do really well, and you think they're like good. You think they're the funniest person ever or whatever, and then you'll see them do bad. And I've learned not to associate people or other comics too much with like a really good set or a bad. I try not to associate them with the one time I see them. I try to just judge them for how I think of them as a person, my honest opinion of their material. Just because the crowd thinks they're funny, I don't know, things are different after you hear things a certain amount of times as well. But I guess that just goes into also like not thinking too much about it. That's something that you should take away. If you bomb a set, you shouldn't take it to heart. It's really about how you handle it is what makes you. And if you can't handle it and you're just like, I quit, and you just eat at it, that's what fucks you up. And yeah, you have to be resilient as a comedian. You have to just keep dusting off your shoulders and keep going and believing in yourself. And if a crowd's not feeling you, that's on them, because at one point, your jokes are funny to somebody. And that's kind of the journey that I'm on. And I feel like everybody should be on, is finding their crowd, not finding jokes to make a crowd like you. Whatever is funny to you, you have to, be confident in it and share it, because sometimes the jokes that I come up with, I've had help. I've had, some of these I'm not just sitting in my room and laughing maniacally to myself. Sometimes I am, I'll be honest. But a lot of these times where I make funny jokes with my friends or people in my personal life, they really, they have me cracking up. And it's almost like I want to share that with people and just share that laughter of the same things. And there's been jokes that it's been in my head for days, and I'm just laughing at it. And then I'll go do them on stage, and when people don't get it, it would kind of bug me. Not really bug me, but it would make me be like, oh man, that didn't work. But I try not to get too hung up over it, because at the end of the day, it's what made me laugh, and I'm just sharing that. And, if I'm going to go anywhere or anything in the future, I want people that are relatable and people that can connect with me. I don't want to fit a mold for a certain crowd or something, So when I'm writing in my notebook or when I'm coming up with jokes or whatever, everything goes. It's what's funny to me. And of course, all comedians or whatever, they all have different thresholds of what's funny to them or not. And some people would say they push the boundaries, and I guess personally, I do think that I've got a little bit of most of these jokes are dirty and fucked up, but that's just how I am, and that's how I like things, and I wouldn't clean it up. I appreciate a good clean joke, though. What else? Not caring. I guess that's kind of like what I covered, You just really can't care too much about other people, but you have to remember sometimes this is a job, And I've done some shows too, besides open mics. I have actually been fortunate and lucky, or maybe my hard work has paid off to where I was actually booked on certain shows. And some of these shows, though, were smaller than the open mics. Let's be honest. I'm giving myself a very honest self-assessment here. And if you're getting paid, it's kind of like a little bit of like, okay, you need to work with this crowd. You are an entertainer. You need to entertain this crowd. So I feel like that's a big difference between like open mics and paid book shows. Open mics is a little bit more of, it's okay to fuck up. It's okay to try new things. But an actual paid show, maybe if somebody saw a clip of yours online or something, they would probably want to see that version of you and not just go up there and fucking, eat a dick. Especially if you're getting paid or they book you on it and people are expecting something. So sometimes I feel like when you are doing the show, it's a little bit of like, here you go, But I feel like that's on the smaller level when the people still don't know who you are. But if you're bigger, people are legitimately coming to see you. I feel like that's when the opportunity is arisen to be the best version of yourself, That's just my honest thinking. And so, yeah, I just think with the open mics, small book shows, and everything in general, it's a good balance of personal development, developing material that you can communicate with other people to share that laughter that you once had to the general public. And then there's also the balance of being a service to the public, just being so it's a weird relationship of you're doing it for yourself, but then you're also doing it for other people, and you need a good balance. You can't be too much about you, and you also have to respect yourself as well. I think that's the biggest takeaway. Overall, I feel like my anxiety has gotten way better in my regular life. I feel like I don't get as nervous anymore, but even after a year and some change, I still get nervous for some shows. It doesn't seem to be as bad as the beginning. I definitely feel more nervous if I feel like I'm trying something new. But I feel like with anything, not just stand-up comedy, I feel like the more you conquer anxiety, the more, it doesn't necessarily go away, but the better you are at dealing with it. I feel like anxiety never really goes away. Well, everybody's a little bit wired differently, but at least for me, anxiety is always a factor. Everybody, you kind of need anxiety. Anxiety's like, it's like a gas. It's like a power for your actions and why you do what you do. You just have to learn to work with it. And I just feel like the more you deal with anxiety, the better you are. You shouldn't avoid it. You should take anxiety head on. And if you've never done stand up and it's something you've always wanted to do, I say take that anxiety head on, because you're going to come out of it a better person if you're willing to learn. Because I feel like there could be some stubborn people. Here's an example of not taking it right, but this might not have to do with anxiety. This just might have to do with delusion. You think you have funny jokes, you go up there, and let's say, I feel like a good sample size is like 30, 40 people, and all a mixed crowd, like how most of the Bay Area is, mixed people. And you fire off all your jokes, and they don't really laugh. And that's why I think it's important to record it, and try to explain it, because maybe you'll kind of realize, like, maybe I'm not funny or something, or maybe that doesn't make sense. Traveling, it's a lot of traveling that goes on, like I said, from all the way from San Francisco to Sacramento to Santa Cruz, all these S's, just all around, dude. It's made me realize that I don't like it. I don't like the traveling, which is why I'm sitting here on fucking YouTube editing this video, because I'd much rather be a stay-at-home comedian, man. I hate traveling. You'd have to pay me so much money to do it. You're risking your life in a way. A lot of people die, car accidents, drunk drivers, all that kind of stuff. And it opened up my eyes a little bit as to with anybody who does traveling for their job, how much of a fucking hassle it is, man. And one more thing before I end this off is just finding my style. Finding my style as a comedian, which I still feel like I'm kind of doing. There's comedians that I like, and I feel like I try to imitate them or something like that. And I remember when I was first starting out, there was like goofy comedians that I liked that were like very animated, So I thought two things. I wanted to be a super animated guy, and I wanted to be like a fast talker, ranter guy who's yelling and stuff like that, because that's what I enjoyed. So I tried it, and it just didn't really seem to work. And it felt like I was trying to be something I wasn't, but it was just something that I'd liked. And then, I don't know, some time went by, and I tried a whole different approach. Before I freaking remember doing somersaults in the beginning of my set and stuff like that, just playing around, just moving, pacing back and forth. And then one day, I didn't even take the mic out of the mic stand. I stood perfectly still, and I talked normal and didn't really have as much energy, but the jokes hit so much harder. I was just like, I don't know if I was just hearing the laughter harder because I was calm and not moving and focused on like doing things and making a scene, or what, or if it just translated. So now I feel like I'm, I was like, okay, this is my style. Am I just going to be this deadpan guy? But then, I still goof around. There's two things. So I don't know. I feel like I'm kind of like a happy middle of like casual with energy. It depends. So I don't know. Still figuring that out. In conclusion, all I have to say is if you want to try stand-up comedy, I say go for it. I feel like mainly good things will come out of it. And I'm not even saying, try it as a career. Just try it in general to experience it. And I feel like it'll benefit your life. Honorable mention, too, there's this podcast that everybody has heard of, I'm pretty sure. It's called Kill Tony. And I don't want to get too much into how that podcast is. Just look it up and you'll understand how it is. But I was kind of wary of that show. I didn't really care too much about it until I started doing stand-up. And that show has really helped me write jokes. So the premise of it is that you get 1 minute to do stand-up. And that goes into the whole attention span being short with people. I had realized, dude, if you like, it doesn't matter how funny a joke is. If you spend 5 minutes explaining it, you're going to lose people's attention. So 1 minute, maybe even less. It's always a challenge. And that's what another comedian on the podcast first told me. Try to be funny every 15 seconds, which is hard. But so between 15 seconds and a minute, try to be funny. And that has helped me tremendously because an open mic is typically 4 to 5 minutes or 4 to 6 minutes, if anything. 6 minutes is pushing it. And if you could come up with just 6 1-minute jokes, you're going to go far. That's what I think. And so just keep trying to come up with 1-minute jokes. And that's the thing, it's better to have less jokes than too many. Or it's better to do less time than too much. It's better to go under your time than over your time in the open mics. You want people wanting more.